Retail moves fast, but too often the technology behind it does not. Legacy systems, rigid architectures, and outdated integrations can quietly limit how brands evolve. The retailers that thrive are the ones building on a flexible foundation, a blueprint designed for change rather than control. In this episode, I'm joined by Julius Carrell. He's the director of Enactor, and he's joining me to explore what it really means to create future-proof retail. We talk about the cost of rigidity, the strength of adaptability, and how a blueprint mindset helps retailers design systems that move at the speed of their customers. Here's Paula Macaggi, and this is episode 96 of my show. Welcome to OFFBounds. Jules, welcome to OFFBounds. I can't believe that we are actually meeting in Mexico City. Welcome to our studio here.
I know, it's a dream come true. It's like a second home to me.
Yeah, we've been trying to meet in the UK or New York, but we made it in Mexico City, so that was very nice.
It's perfect for me.
Yeah. I'm very excited to talk to you. We've talked so many times over Zoom. So nice to see you in person and actually get your perspective here on the show. I think you're always talking about how retail moves fast and how everything changes. And I think there's so much complexity in the tech stack of retailers that makes all these changes hard on this perspective. So your perspective is going to be very valuable for us because I want to understand how they can be more flexible. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So why do you think many brands are starting to realize now that they need more flexibility in the tech stack?
Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious for everyone that the technology is always changing really fast. And it does seem like the rate of change of technology increases as well. I mean, just in everyone's lives, who would have thought that, was it 3-4 years ago that we would be talking to these chatbots and almost, relying on them, not just for our customer journeys, but also just our everyday lives, And I heard a stat from someone the other day, which was kind of crazy, which was, I think that asking ChatGPT for advice on what to buy is now gone just above asking family and friends, right? I mean, that is an absolutely incredible stat. So if you're a brand and you want to stay relevant in today's world, I think we've definitely well past that phase where it's not just about, extra margin. It's about survival. It's existential, but it's also about thriving as well. And so, yeah, particularly in this sort of post-COVID world, as they say, being able to adapt to change has become more relevant than ever. But of course, the big question is, what do you prioritize, right? And I meet these CIOs and I really feel for them as guys and girls, running IT organizations in big companies, big brands, because where do you start, And, you speak to a CIO and they sort of say, well, 10 years ago, we were running 150 different applications, right? And then it went to 200. And then now you meet those 300, 400, 500 different applications. And I'm hoping that the guys and girls at home are sort of giving a wry smile, the amount of different systems people have to incorporate into their business
is what we call the Frankenstack.
With Frankenstack suggests it's all kind of one thing, right? You've got lots and lots of different stacks all over these businesses. You've got tactical decisions. They've inherited stuff from 10, 30, sometimes 40 years ago. And some of it's not even integrated, right? So stack suggests integration. So some of it's not integrated. So I think what brands have sort of realized is just the sheer volume of technology that they've absorbed over the years. And of course, then what then comes next is, okay, well, we've got all these technologies, but genuinely, how do we make them more sustainable? Sustainable from the perspective of being able to maintain them, to adapt in the future, to make them relevant, even figure out what is actually mission critical or not, is a constant struggle, right? And this isn't just about the customer experience, it's also about internal operations as well. It's about supply chain. We're obviously trying to help navigate that complexity. And as I say, I do feel for these people because it's a huge job. It's a huge job. And they're I think sometimes it might be misunderstood by the rest of the company, what do you mean you can do X tomorrow, Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's assuming people are coming to you with clarity of what X is in the first place, right? Because I mean, another interesting thing about technology is that as soon as the smartphones were in everyone's pockets, people started interacting with technology a lot more than they were before. So their expectations are different. Their expectations about what is good, what is integrated, what is informative, what is a good experience, what is a good implementation of something. that expectation's gone up internally within retailers, right? Because at the end of the day, if you can use some service from Google for free of charge, and then you look at how much you might, internally people might be spending on IT, you think, oh gosh, this stuff must be easy. But of course, it's really not. These huge tech companies are just so big that that's how they deliver quality. So the brands have got to wrestle with some of these challenges, Absolutely. External expectations for consumers, internal expectations as well, right? And that's even before you start talking about integration, right? Which of course is like the crazy word in the demon that's always around to make these things work and valuable.
Yeah, we talk a little bit about integration here on OFFBounds, and I can see the sweat coming on every leader.
It's good sweat. Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
But so it's what you were saying is that the complexity of the stack that they have is just because they have too many technologies, or maybe some older technologies integrating with new technologies. How can you future-proof the business within the tech stack?
Well, first thing, what we find is that the reason they've got a lot of technologies around is that there's some old ways of working lying around, right? So one way, of course, we'll move on into future-proofing and what you can do with the technology perspective, right?
Yeah.
But fundamentally, future-proofing yourself has got to be cultural. There's got to be a culture that we are going to set ourselves up with internal organization, our teams and capabilities, our choice of the right partners and implementers, and of course the right technologies themselves. We've got to try to corral together a culture in how retailers organize themselves, and also how they organize with vendors as well. It's a big factor to be able to get that mentality of future-proofing, right? And of course, you've got to choose your tech stacks properly as well. You got to get something that's flexible. You got to go for something which allows you to be forward thinking and not just thinking about how can I, catch up or maintain my position with others. And when it comes to, new implementation of something or the replacing of something, you got to be thinking about how is this actually going to take my business forward, as opposed to just essentially treating it like plumbing, where essentially things just continue as normal. Right?
So what you're saying is that it's even more than just a tech stack. It's almost like a mindset.
It's a mindset, 100%. And I know we've got clients where, one of the first things they thought, and this is originated actually in Scandinavia. So it's a sort of cultural thing there that's come from there. But, not just thinking about implementing technology, but how do departments interact with each other? How does the business and IT genuinely interact, right? Absolutely, we all know it can't be too far away, it can't be too distant, otherwise you've got the expectation and delivery going in such different directions. But then sometimes I think some people found it can't be too close either, right? Because you sort of get silos and things, right? And it's different for each company as well. So, it takes that sort of precision sort of scalpel within an organization and leadership within an organization to try and foster this culture within a retailer to make them future-proof, right? Yeah.
Would you call it the blueprint mindset?
The blueprint mindset, absolutely. It has that sort of design mindset, but it also suggests a sort of static nature as well, right? So it's sort of a evolving, organic blueprint mindset. Yeah, absolutely.
You go creative.
We're so passionate about this, yeah. And that's actually towards making organizational, but also, of course, software architectural structures, fit for purpose as a future-proof is all we're about. Yeah.
So help me understand. Of course, I'm not the CTO or the CIO, but if we could start from scratch, because I think when we are talking about retail technology, every technology, they have a purpose either for customer experience or something else. But what would be for you, if you could build from scratch a system, what would be the good fundamentals for having that blueprint architecture?
First of all, you have to identify what are your core mission critical systems, right? Every retailer, they knows they've got an ERP system. Every retailer knows that they have to sell online. Every retailer knows they have to sell in store. Every retailer knows they have to, create an order. And then you have the sort of kind of secondary systems that support all that. Everyone knows that you need to have a single view of your customer. Everyone knows you have a single view of your loyalty. So choose your big pieces properly, right? And don't let any of those big pieces be the things that can slow you down, right? And ERP is a really good one. It's not my domain, but absolutely observe that, when people really look at the core, they think, I want to be an international retailer who can maybe do wholesale, or I want to sell in lots of different countries, or I'm going to have a mixture of sort of wholesale products, or maybe some of my own brand. I'm going to deal with different suppliers, right? And absolutely, we see that they see the core infrastructure there is not going to help them achieve their big goals. And of course, in our domain and store systems, as the stores have evolved, you need something that's going to adapt to the new era of retail, which is, essentially different thing to different types of retailers. We're past the era of you just put stuff on shelves and people come in, right? Okay. Some retailers, it's more about that.
You have to give us so many reasons for the customers to come.
Well, yeah. And sometimes that reason is price, certainly where I'm from in the UK, discount retailers are like, they've done so well in the last few years, right? And disrupted retail, right, on price points. But then you get other retailers where it's about that experience with the product, experience with the environment in the store as well. And the technology is a part of that because, we've all been to stores where you've got a great experience, but actually fundamentally the technology is like just so not in keeping with the overall investment that's gone into that.
Yeah, imagine you go to this store, you have such a fantastic experience, and then you can't check out.
You can't check out, and there's like a Casio box in the corner. You
leave the store like, it's like your last touch point with the client.
The last touch point is the worst, and it's like, this makes no sense, and particularly given how much people invest in that experience, it's like, well, okay, let's make the technology, really slick as well. In some stores, it's about the technology being invisible, right? But in others, it's almost it being, very present, And then, of course, you've got other retailers where the engagement is very much about person engagement. It's about the relationship maybe between not just the brand, but individuals, private shoppers and stuff like that, right? And that connection with the customer. And of course, empowering with the right tools is a massive part of that. Because at the end of the day, if you haven't got the right technologies and tools to make that possible, then the business model doesn't work. Those are some sort of some examples. So to answer your question, big blocks. Store systems, ERP, get those things right. And of course, getting those things right is not just about your requirements of today, it's making sure that they're flexible enough to integrate themselves in the future. Then it's all about also having the right different technologies in between that can help you bring these together in a sustainable way, right? And there's different architectural patterns that make that possible. Of course, the sort of trend towards microservices and getting the right level of, different components in different domains. You don't want to take that too far. You don't want to have too many because actually these microservices, they do take a lot of, there's cost involved in maintaining them, but you want to have for these key domains, these microservices in place. And for the technologies, there's of course, good use of things like API gateways to sort of glue all these things together. And of course, what sort of we believe really passionately is that the products you come with need to come with a set of tools that make it possible to achieve these blueprints, right? These are not just products. There needs to be a level of adaptability both in and around the product, right? So they can adapt to an ecosystem because every ecosystem is different, right?
Of course.
Every brand, and like we said.
But that's what makes them special, right? They know what is fundamental for them and for their customers. So therefore, they build their own thing.
The special source or even the regular source of every retailer, is then mirrored and projected in the systems that they use, right? The journey you offer is delivered and therefore reflected in the systems that you implement, right? So for example, if you don't offer click and collect, right? You don't have a system that offers click and collect, So of course you need to be able to make sure that your technologies, they give you the core fundamentals, in their domain, but they're adaptable for this architecture, leveraging things like, microservices and real-time APIs. And of course, more recently, different flavors of AI where that makes it different. And it's not technology for technology's sake, as we know.
Yeah, so what you were saying is every retailer is different, every blueprint is different, and so therefore they need systems and technologies and platforms that allow them to be flexible within their own vision of how they're going to serve this customer. This is the blueprint.
This is the blueprint.
And
this is one of the blueprints. This is one of the blueprints. Yeah, absolutely.
What is the price of having a rigid system? Because I think by what I'm hearing is that there is still a lot of retailers that are working with systems that they can be so flexible with it. What stops them when they're working with these rigid systems?
Well, it's just, to start with, it's just pure play disappointment, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, it's, your consumers notice, but also staff morale. I sort of, you see brands and the staff sort of know when the technology is not great, and they sort of affects the way that they interact or the way they work as well. And of course, there's all the commercial costs as well, right? At the end of the day, if you're not making specific journeys possible, then there's a financial cost to that, right? And then conversely, if you can make these things possible in a great experience, then of course there's commercial benefit as well. But also the real cost is probably the ones that it's hard to measure, right? Because it's hard to measure what you don't achieve in the future, right? So if you can't adapt and you can't get from here to some point in time where you've improved, you've added new journeys, new value propositions. Maybe it's more personalization, whatever. It's the law of opportunity cost, right? You don't really know what you're missing out. So it's hard.
I once interviewed a retailer from New Zealand, and they're a telco, so it's very specific. Telco, it's like very. You have to go through a lot of laws. Like really, the government has a lot of regulations. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sure.
So it's a very tough area to operate. So they did an interview with all the employees to say like what is frustrating about their job, and many mentioned the system. After they changed the system and like it was much easier to operate for the staff, they just saw like a lot more like better customer experience, better NPS. Like so, I imagine that like being rigid means that too. Like everybody's unsatisfied, the customer, the staff, and
it's lack of.
And it's hard to measure if you're not asking the question.
It's lack of empowerment. And of course, then you might point to different things, right? So in the example you give, I don't know, maybe internally they thought, oh, what we need to do is we need to give better training, or maybe we need to give more staff incentives, or maybe we need more easier way to get staff feedback on different things, and actually maybe that's the wrong way of looking at it. Maybe we're just not giving them the best tools in the first place. There's nothing wrong with our people, actually just maybe it's the tools that we're giving them, right?
Have you had some leaders coming to you like, oh, I think my systems are fine. And then when they switched, they were like, oh, thanks for showing me.
Very rarely have people have come in and said, I have exactly what I want. And like you said, to the point, where, maybe everyone's always worried they don't have enough, right? Which is why they accumulate so much in the first place. Yeah. I definitely seen it many times where you get unintended business benefits, right? Some stat comes out of the woodwork which no one expected ever. And the business case was miles away, and maybe, the business case, fine, it achieved, but it didn't really do much. But then there's some other stat or something which came out and, gosh, we didn't expect customer loyalty to improve by 38%. Oh, wow, okay, that was crazy. We didn't expect, transaction time to come down, by that much. We were mainly focused on this, right? We didn't expect to find staff efficiency in this part of the store to come down this much. So I think that's probably more in line with what I've seen. It's more the unintended benefits, for sure. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And just to clarify to our audience, what Enactor actually does. I think like we're talking a lot about how to solve complexity, but let's get to what actually do you do?
What do we do? Yeah. Look, Enactor, retail technology platform, mainly focused on unified commerce, but as Gartner says, anchored by the store. Yeah. A flexible, starting with a standardized platform for selling and engaging customers in store, including with things like inventory and payments as well, but also a unified platform for other channels as well. We come into a retailer and we provide, this core, as I said, flexible platform that can deliver their journeys both in store and online that they want. But as you sort of suggested with the blueprint narrative, it's all about providing a platform that is not necessarily just take it as it is. Yeah, it provides new ways of deploying, but also new ways of adapting to the ecosystem to give the retailer the journeys that they want.
So instead of the retailer to getting the technology and adapt to it, like, hey, now we have this technology, we need to make things work for this, you're actually getting a technology that will adapt to what you already have.
We enable both, right? At the end of the day is that, you're trying to achieve something, there's multiple ways to do things in technology, right? So, and in Enactor, we like to think that we pull and we push in the right balance where that you adapt the solution where you absolutely have to, and we absolutely enable that to a really fantastic, really unique degree. But at the same time, maintaining standardization always has an argument as well. So we have standard interfaces and lots of standard functionality. And of course, like we said, that sort of mindset of future-proof also means, okay, well, actually, maybe I will adapt my business process. That's where the culture comes in, right? I'm going to adapt my current processes to this product, right? So we have this fantastic flexibility, but we also have this, fantastic core where, a lot of retailers basically will try and enforce to adopt enacted best practice. So what we do is we come in, and one of the reasons I think we're a bit special is we love complexity. We love complexity. Give us so many systems we have to integrate. Give us all those journeys that we have to do, and we have to work with the tech teams on, and the different ways of doing it. Right.
I'm so happy you're recording this because you're the only person that says that.
We love it. No, we do. No, we generally do. We want to. We're sort of that kind of people. We want to go where no one else wants to go. Right. We do telcos, for example. The journeys in telco, like you suggested. Hard. We love that. And every telco we've ever worked with has this sort of journeys a slightly different way. And we made that possible through the product, through this flexibility, but also the model. And part of the cultural change is future-proofing is taking on responsibility. You know, it has to be a level of responsibility within the retailer to make future-proofing possible. That's the cultural change, yeah. Ironically, sometimes it means taking on less responsibility because they do so much, right?
Yeah.
But most of it takes having the courage to take a little bit more, yeah. And then with the tools that we provide as well as the product, we try and make that possible so that they can, without an actor, if they want, right, they can deliver the future initiatives themselves without us even, right? We do believe that's a real key way for speed, but also strategic advantage. So that's kind of what we're about.
Absolutely. So now that we are talking about future-proofing, changing your mindset, being future-proof mindset, having your blueprint mindset, how do you see the next 10 years in developing, once you develop this system, how do you see this 10 years, this evolution? Because you've been, 10 years at Enactor?
Yeah.
You've seen the change 10 years from 10 years ago. Where do you see the change for 10 years?
Well, in our domain or in retail technology in general?
Yeah. In retail technology, I would say in the tech stack of because if they adapt more flexible technologies, where they're gonna get in the future?
Yeah, really good question. I mean, like I said, it depends on different brands. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be yet another guy on another podcast talking about the disruption of AI. It's sort of it makes your eyes roll a little bit now, doesn't it? But integrating. But clearly, it's a transformational technology. I mean, unfortunately, it's a transformational technology.
It is
bringing that in the right way into interactions. For example, in the store, is critical. But it's going to be different for everyone else. It's going to be different for everyone, right? And everyone's got to have their different ways of utilizing this technology in their different environments, right? For some retailers, it's going to be about, for example, just less fraud, right? But in others, of course, it's about more informed decisions, predictive analysis, I mean, the ironic thing for me is that certainly in my time, so many retailers which I met 10 years ago, never achieved what they wanted to do, in their big grand plans, and so they're still sort of talking about it sometimes, and partly it's a lack of the ability to achieve that culture and that future proofing. I think everyone is still trying to achieve what we now call unified commerce, right? Everyone is still trying to do that.
Nobody has nailed that 100% yet.
Not really. I mean,
because it changes so much. It changes
so, and it's hard to do. I mean, that's the main thing, right? It is hard to do because it is complex, right?
If it was easy, AI would be doing for us.
Well, yeah, and if it was easy, so many companies wouldn't exist, right? It would be such a consolidated market, right? So integrating new technologies, I think that everyone, once they get to this stage where they've got all their sort of big pieces in place, it's going to be about then integrating even more technologies and products to improve the value of these journeys, right? The journey is one thing, but the value of these journeys is another. Better incentives, better loyalty, better promotions, better predictive, better personalization. Yeah. It's got to go in that technology, in that sort of in that type of
the
direction.
technologies and what the customers want evolves.
Yes.
We see this every 3 months they want something different, right? So you pretty much have to have the technology that will grow with you when these journeys are changing.
Yeah, I think for big retailers, I think that trying to foster a culture where you can match the small upstart disruptors, that's got to be interesting, right? Because the people who come in and have a completely different attitude to merchandising or the journey or the environment or whatever it might be, how can you become a company that can adapt to delivering something really quite different to what people normally associate you with you? Of course, you've got to balance the brand and that type of thing. But, certainly in the area of retail, there's every now and again, you really get surprised by, someone's brand new concept, right? And you think, okay, yeah. And then, of course, you think, well, for large retailers, is technology one of the blockers for responding to that? Absolutely. Of course it is. Yeah.
Amazing. And next time we're gonna see each other before we're seeing each other in London.
Yeah.
But then the following time that we're gonna see each other is gonna be in January in New York.
Yeah, NRF. Nice and cold.
Yeah. We're going for a run.
Yes,
we know that.
Every day, I think I saw.
We'll see. We'll see. One day at least we're gonna
Tuesday,
run.
Wednesday, Thursday.
But what should we expect from Enactor and NRF? What our audience should be expecting from Enactor at the event, as everybody's going to be looking for technologies?
Well, yeah, I mean, the big context for us is that we are essentially launching properly in the US, right? North America, yeah. HQ in London. We got operations around Europe and parts of Asia, and actually here quite a lot of Mexico.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, that's why we're here. Yeah, unfortunately, and we've got some clients in the US, but but it's all about launching these ideas, the whole new, very unique concept of Enactor that I laid out in New York for the North American market, right? And I think the market's ready for it. The market's ready for, a new take and this model. I think the US has got the scale, the confidence, the money, and just generally the technical expertise to take this Enactor model. And I think they also have the complexity. So the demand, I think the demand is there. Certainly in the bit of experience I've had in the market. I've definitely seen a lot of evidence that all these challenges of all the retailers that we've worked with, it's there in spades. And it's obviously such a big market.
Do you think that's actually an interesting question, because we're in so many different markets. So you are in Latam, you are in North America, you are in Europe and Asia. So you have the perspective from all over the world. Are we always talking about the same challenges?
Yeah.
Every market is the same.
It's sort of funny. It's kind of funny. It really is. And obviously you get cultural differences and there's unique things. But you do sort of sometimes think, is everyone like singing off the same sort of sheet here? And it's the same questions, challenges, almost attitudes. Certainly ways of working, things like procurement but the architectural, and of course, off the big technologies as well. We work with loads of people who use SAP. It doesn't matter if we're out there in Southeast Asia, we're in Europe, or in North America, Latin America, it's SAP, etc. Oracle, it's the same tech landscape. Often, similar consultants and things, So sort of institutionally, there's so many similarities. But the challenges are all there, right? And everyone's at different speeds and different states.
Yeah.
And
but the questions are the same. What are usually the questions?
Questions are the same. Certainly, organizationally, what do I need in terms of people to move faster? It's a big challenge, right? I mean, getting the right people in, it seems to be in any line of work is always the challenge, right? So what are the challenges on the people? How do I do things as quickly as possible? Yeah, there's always that expectation. You said it's going to take 8 months. I want it in 4 months. Okay, yeah, all right. So that's a very typical challenge. And of course, how do I achieve the customer journeys that my business want? I mean, it's everywhere. And of course, that depending on the type of retailer they are, the journeys are pretty similar, but they all have their own unique challenges as well, specific to that organization. And
what is interesting is that you're gonna be, as I understood, you're gonna be in New York, NRF, with your booth there, where people can view these journeys.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna be showing not just products, but what the possibilities are. That core flexibility, the thing that makes complexity sort of possible, feasible, the thing that makes us love it. We'll be showing that off. It's going to be really exciting, and people will be able to see. We like to think we're a completely open book, right? And you will be able to get, because at the end of the day, you work with someone like us. It's not just about the solution; it's also about the people, right? We've also got.
No, this is absolutely 100% truth. I think, because technology is a long-term investment. You're not going to be with someone for like a month and then you're never going to talk again.
It is a marriage. It is a marriage. We are married.
Exactly. So people is definitely very important, because these are the people you're going to work with for a while, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are privately owned company. Been doing it a long time, a lot of experience. Got a solution which we've been very fortunate enough has taken us to lots of parts of the world and some really interesting companies. So I think we've got lots to share, as well as to provide, right? So that's kind of what we're going to be sharing.
I'm very excited to see you in New York. I'm very excited to run with you, and I'm very excited to experience this blueprint. But before we close this interview, I will always ask my guests something more personal, right? You've been in the retail technology business for 10 years. Yeah. And what would be your advice to someone who wants to succeed in this environment?
Patience.
Patience.
I mean, that's the first, at the end of the day, and quite rightly, people are very thoughtful, about their decisions, their strategies. And also, like you said, it's our relationships with people are based their marriages, and marriage is built on trust, and trust takes time, right? And so I think a lot of patience. But at the same time, I think there's a phrase which is that you can achieve. People tend to think they can achieve a lot more in 1 year than they actually can, but they seem to underestimate how much they can do in 10 years, right? I think that it is finding that balance between being patient but being ambitious, right? So certainly that's from my perspective, working with sort of lots of companies. And within the retail technology space itself, it's finding that right balance between experience and personal dogmas and things, right? But also just keeping open mind, right? You know, the best clients we've ever worked with, you know, they know their stuff, they know their landscape, but they're absolutely open to new ways of working, new ideas, right? And
you have to.
You have to, yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
We're just talking about the price of being rigid as a software, but being rigid as a person has an even higher price, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And sometimes we found, like, you know, you find these gem personalities, right? You know, the people who, they really can inspire others to be open, right? You know, and that's the culture. That's the future-proofing culture. In fact, I'm going to say the future-proofing culture is also about being open to change. You know, being open to new ideas. You know, I'm sure some people in retail, maybe retail technology, don't realize that just their connections with vendors, unbelievable opportunity to learn. You know, you've got, like, at your fingertips so many, you know, all in these hundreds of different domains, right? You're engaged with people who really know their area, right? And the reason you know they know their area is because they exist, right? You know, these companies that have survived for a long time in these areas, they wouldn't exist if they didn't know what they were doing. And so, yeah, leveraging the experience out there, I think, is a great opportunity, and maybe people should utilize.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
Jules, it was a pleasure to have you here on OFFBounds. I'm excited to be here in Mexico with you and see you in, I don't know how many countries next. Looking forward to understanding more about the blueprint.
Thanks so much.